If you've been watching my general psychology series so far, you know that there are several different theories in psychology to explain how development occurs. Well, in today's video, I'm going to talk about one of my favorites. It's Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist that focused more on the cognitive development of children. In fact, he focused so much on this topic that he's frequently regarded as being the father of developmental psychology. It's actually kind of difficult to even find a picture of him without a bunch of children around him. Since Piaget was a cognitive psychologist, he looked more at the internal mechanisms of psychology. His theory can be summarized as focusing on how a child is able to view the world around them based upon their thinking, reasoning, memory, language, and all the many different aspects of a person's cognitive abilities. His theory is discontinuous in nature, so it really looks at development as being a series of stages that a child must go through. There are 4 stages in Piaget's theory: the sensorimotor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and the formal operational. Each of these stages have certain developmental milestones within them that signal that a child is progressing through that stage. As I explain each of these stages, I'll be sure to talk about certain developmental milestones that are associated with them. One thing to keep in mind is that this whole theory is really an extension of the prototype model. I did a separate video on the prototype model, and if you haven't watched it yet, I definitely encourage you to do it prior to watching this video. For those that have watched it, think of that process of forming categories of information that develop into prototypes as going through each of these stages. In each stage, our knowledge and experiences grow and change, which causes us to question, refine, and expand upon those categories of concepts that help us explain the world we live in. Let's start by talking about the first of Piaget's stages, which is the sensorimotor stage. This stage lasts from about birth through to 2 years old. Infants and young toddlers don't have the connections within their brains, the knowledge, or the experience to really think and reason. The part of their brains that is pretty developed, though, deals with things like their senses and motor or muscle movements. In fact, some of our senses, like hearing, is already pretty developed even before we're born. Other senses that aren't, like vision, soon develop not long after birth. For this reason, in the sensorimotor stage, infants and young toddlers are making sense of the world around them through their senses and movements. Just think about it for a second. If you've ever seen an infant, they stare and they put things in their mouths. They react strongly to sounds, whether good or bad. They grasp at stuff and they move all the time. As they grow through this stage, they start to understand that their world can't just be explained through what they can see, hear, taste, smell, and touch. This is apparent when they learn something known as object permanence. Object permanence is the understanding that just because you may not be able to see something, it doesn't mean that that thing no longer exists. We can't see the sun at night, but we know it still exists, we just can't see it. Newborns don't really have this understanding yet. After all, if you're viewing the world based solely off your senses, you not being able to see something does mean that it's gone. It doesn't exist to you anymore. You can usually tell if an infant has object permanence if you play peekaboo with them. Say you hide your face either with your hand or by ducking below something. A baby without object permanence will just react, but one with object permanence will actually try to find you. So if you duck underneath the table, they will actually look to see if you're under the table. As a child goes from the sensorimotor stage into the next stage, known as the pre-operational stage, they no longer are interacting with their world through their senses and movements. This stage is about from 2 to 6 years of age. Kids are now developing higher level cognitive skills. They're beginning to be able to think, remember, learn, and speak. However, they don't really have a lot of experience or knowledge yet. So what they tend to do is have a very rich imagination. This is the stage of pretend play, imaginary friends, fantasy, and make-believe. Children start to hugely expand their language skills during this stage, which helps create an explosion of cognitive abilities. They're beginning to think about everything around them. Early in this stage, children tend to have what's known as egocentrism. Egocentrism involves a child having difficulty in taking the perspective of others into account. They basically think everyone sees things the way they do and feel the same way they do. As children progress through this stage, the egocentrism usually gets replaced with what's called theory of mind. Children are better able to recognize that other people may have different perspectives and thoughts from their own. Of course, this isn't always present, and I definitely have met some adults that still don't seem to have an understanding that other people don't think and feel the same way they do. However, this is usually the stage in which that does become at least possible. The other milestone event in this stage involves a child learning something called conservation. Conservation is the idea that even if you change the appearance of something, it's still equal in size if nothing has been removed or added. I'm sure that sounds like a really weird term, but it's an easy one to explain, so let me give you an example. Say you have two young kids of the same age, neither of whom understands conservation yet. It's lunchtime, so you decide to make them both a sandwich. One kid says he wants his sandwich cut in half, so you cut it in half. Immediately, the other kid is complaining that he only got one sandwich, but that the other kid got two. They see the two halves of the sandwich as being two sandwiches, not as being two halves to one sandwich. This is a great way to start a fight with young kids, by the way. Once the kids understand conservation, they know that just because you cut a sandwich in half, it doesn't mean that you magically made two sandwiches appear. This is critically important because as we transition into the next stage, or the concrete operational stage, which is from about 7 to 11 years of age, children start to become more capable of understanding the concept of conservation and use it to expand their development into something called reversibility. So reversibility refers to the understanding that objects can be changed and then returned back to their original form or condition. This helps to make basic understanding of math problems possible. This stage also leads to huge expansions of understanding based on reality. Remember, in the last stage, children started to make sense out of the world around them through imagination, fantasy, make-believe. Well, in this stage, children are starting to understand the truth. This is the stage where children understand Santa isn't real or there isn't an Easter bunny. And my God, I really hope there aren't any kids watching this video, by the way. If there is, I'm lying, kids. Santa Claus is real. The Easter bunny is real. Just ignore what I'm saying. As we continue to grow and develop, we enter Piaget's final stage, the formal operational stage. This is the stage from about 11 years of age on where we're now able to think and reason more about highly advanced things like morality, ethics, abstract concepts, and hypothetical situations. According to Piaget, this is where the story ends, with the formal operational stage. However, many psychologists since him have proposed that there must be an additional stage to his theory of development. After all, just think about it for a second. Does an 11 or 12-year-old think the same way somebody does at 16? How about 30 or 60? Probably not. There's also a biological basis to say that there must be more beyond the formal operational stage. Our brains are still maturing well past 11 years of age. In fact, the part of our brain that is especially geared towards higher order cognitive abilities, the prefrontal cortex, really isn't fully developed until about our mid-20s onward. Despite all these points, there is only these 4 established stages to Piaget's theory of development. It remains to this day one of the most influential and often cited theories to explain our psychological development. And I hope you enjoyed hearing about it today because it tends to be one of my favorite theories. If you're enjoying content like this, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and give me a like by by pressing the thumbs up icon below. This helps me to continue to expand these videos and provide amazing content to all my viewers. Thanks for watching, everybody.